All right, here we go. Let's give it a shot, shall we? Let's see what this is all about. I'm just curious. It's been a while since we've seen this channel, actually, so I'd be curious to see what's been happening.
I can feel it. The games we're playing today are getting bigger, they're getting more expensive, they're getting more beautiful, yet at the exact same time, for whatever reason, they're less fulfilling than they've ever been.
That's true.
Not all of them, but a lot of them. How many times over the last couple of years have you guys sat down and played a game and just expected more from it? Not because it was a bad game, but because you saw the potential in it, and it wasn't there.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that I try to do on this channel is to actually look into the reasons why players are frustrated in the first place. Not just talk about industry drama or, you know, developer missteps and things like that, but actually try to figure out why players are frustrated in the first place. And I was watching Shangri-La Frontier, an anime. I'm sitting back thinking to myself, I wish that MMOs were as good as they were in anime. I wish video games were as good as they were in anime. The mechanics that they show off, the power scaling, the abilities, the themes that they go into, how some of the scenarios play out, the sense of adventure. These things should be in video games. I mean, they're being inspired by video games in the first place, so why aren't they there? And then I came across an interview with Konrad Tomaskovitz. I hope that I didn't completely murder that name, but he's the ex-director of The Witcher 3 and ex-co-director of Cyberpunk 2077.
Oh, are we gonna be talking about that new game that's coming out?
And he left CD Projekt Red to go start his own studio, something smaller, something more independent, something free. A studio that he worked at for 20 years, over 20 years. He turned them into an RPG powerhouse. Why would he do something like that?
That's true.
And after reading his interview, it confirms something that I've been thinking for a long time. This industry is too big to move forward, too big to do anything new. But before we dive into that...
Yeah, because everyone's just kind of scared to like experiment and do like new stuff and everything like that. So it's just kind of like, you know, there's not really like, when was the last time that like a AAA studio decided to experiment in their games, you know, specifically like mechanic wise or some weird gameplay? Because I know a lot back in the old days of older video games, they used to like, there was like so many different types of video games with like different mechanics and like crazy things, you know.
The news not long ago, a studio comprised of former CD Projekt Red talent called Rebel Wolves revealed their debut title in the Blood of the Dawnwalker. Now, I'm generalizing a little bit for time's sake. However, the game seems to be a Witcher-like title where you take up arms as a half-vampire, half-human to reclaim your family who's been taken by vampires, and they have essentially enslaved the human population while exacting a blood tax. A really cool premise for a game, but it begs the question as to why a 20-year executive-level employee at CD Projekt Red would leave one of the most prestigious studios
that is very true
industry to essentially go and start over from scratch. I mean, there is a lot of risk involved, a risk few would take. You're putting your career, livelihood, and reputation on the line, and there has to be a pretty damn good reason for that. Well, come to find out, risk is the exact reason why they left. In an interview written by Robert Jones of PC Gamer titled The Witcher 3's director explains why he had to leave CD Projekt Red to make his dream vampire RPG, we had crazy ideas. Robert writes, for PC Gamer Magazine's upcoming The Blood of the Dawnwalker issue, I flew out to Warsaw to visit Rebel Wolves and speak to a number of its key devs, including founder Konrad Tomaskovitz, best known for being the director of The Witcher 3, one of gaming's greatest fantasy RPG experiences. Tomaskovitz also worked as co-director on Cyberpunk 2077 before leaving CDPR. The obvious question is why an established and proven director would feel the need to move on from somewhere they had helped to such success. I set up Rebel Wolves because I felt I wanted to make something that was unique with my friends, says Tomaskovitz. Of course, we have a huge love for RPG games and what has been done before in the past, but I feel those things, those rules of RPG games can be expanded and evolved. We have crazy ideas. We knew that, you know, if we wanted to make them, we would need to open our own studio.
That's
because
true.
it would be too hard to convince a big company, you know, with non-IP to change and do something new and do something crazy. Actually, it's risky because we're doing some solutions which are new. And there it is, a few words that speak volumes. The vast majority of the biggest titles across the entire industry are legacy IP, long-standing franchises, well-known names that have built empires: Assassin's Creed, Diablo, Call of Duty, The Witcher, God of War, Halo, and the list goes on. Most of the biggest publishers
No, it's just like I guess you could say like it's kind of like creative differences and then creative boringness, you know. He wanted to leave because he wanted to take the RPG genre itself and basically level it up to a new level or so with these new crazy, mechanics that they want to try and experiment with it, and all this other stuff, which I think is pretty cool because honestly, there's honestly not really that much like experimentation when it comes to like some of the big AAA games. There honestly really is not. They're all kind of like the same. They play it safe, they put the same mechanics and everything, and it's just kind of like, eh. But at the end of the day, there are some that do try new mechanics, but then the problem is the game doesn't land or the people doesn't like the new mechanic, and then the game fails as well because the people don't want to try new mechanics, right? Even though they were bitching and complaining that they want something new mechanics and shit. But then when they bring something new, those players, complain a lot too as well. So, it's kind of like, it's like the two sides of one coin, you got one problem, you got something cool and unique, but then like people who are like the fans of those people or so of the same company or so, they like, oh, we don't like this, blah, 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 go back to
on Jewel, and oftentimes avoid investing in new IPs or even iterating on their existing ones in meaningful ways. Minor tweaks and adjustments, recycled mechanics that other studios found success in using, crossover with relevant genres, safe and measured approaches. And that's where the problem lies. These massive publishers, the ones that hold some of the most beloved franchises in gaming, are no longer in a position where they can take any real risks. It's not that they don't want to innovate, it's that they can't afford to innovate. The sheer scale of these companies, the weight of their headcounts, and the financial commitments that they are tied to with every single release mean that every game that they produce has to be a guaranteed success, or at least in their eyes it is. They're too afraid to break the wheel.
Yeah, that's the problem when it comes to like the AAA game industry. Well, that's why like indie games have been a little bit more enjoyable when it comes to like new mechanics and new funky, things that they'd like to experiment with compared to like AAA games. AAA games will always be there, right? Because there's always an audience for people who like AAA games. But then the problem is like they don't try anything new. They don't try something new, something, I don't know, just a new IP or some new mechanic or so for the new IP or anything like that. They always kind of like Call of Duty. Every fucking year we get a Call of Duty. They barely change anything. I'll do that later, not right now. And all this other stuff. So yeah.
Single game can
I'm in the middle of the video. Sorry.
Dollars to develop, and when the livelihood of thousands of employees are tied to that game's success, innovation starts looking less like an opportunity and more like a liability. This is why so many publishers latch onto legacy IPs with a death grip. Assassin's Creed, Call of Duty, The Elder Scrolls, Diablo, these franchises have been around for decades. And while they still sell, they've reached the point where they're just repeating themselves with minor adjustments. The problem isn't necessarily that these games are bad. Some of them definitely are, but plenty of people are still enjoying them, and they often deliver at least a competent experience, but they don't move forward. They don't take any meaningful risks because they can't. The industry is locked into a cycle where studios are specializing in a singular franchise.
See, that's also the problem too. Like the problem is with like most of these like AAA games specifically, like they come out too fast, too quickly, and there's not really enough time for them to polish the game, experiment with the game, with like new mechanics or like anything different or something new, So it's just kind of like, it kind of feels like the same shit from last year, right? Call of Duty is the same. Pokemon is the same. Battlefield also, well, Battlefield does experiment here and there, but nothing like grandioso though. What is it? What other specific game can I think of off the top of my head? Oh yeah, FIFA, yeah, the sports games, yeah, but the sports games are kind of like,
all of their resources into maintaining them rather than exploring new ideas. And the bigger these games get, the harder it becomes to justify taking a chance on anything else.
Oh, open world genre RPG games. They're usually the same thing with like big open worlds. Sometimes the side quests are cool. Sometimes, well, most of the side quests aren't super great. Unless it's like from CD Projekt Red, then that's a different story when it comes to some of their side missions. But usually a lot of other game devs that make like side quests or in an open world settings, right? it's just kind of like, yeah, ignore, skip, don't care, blah blah blah. But when it comes to the Witcher 3 or so, it's kind of a little bit different. I don't know. I played it, right? I played it, but I didn't finish it, right? Um, and I actually enjoyed more the side quest in The Witcher 3 than I did in any other like open world like RPG style game.
The irony is that's not how these franchises were born in the first place. When Blizzard made Diablo, when Bethesda made the Elder Scrolls, when BioWare launched
Yeah.
Dragon Age, these games were massive gambles. They were made by smaller teams operating with fewer resources, but a vision that was driven by creativity rather than market expectations. These weren't sure bets, these were passion projects that resonated with players because they did something new. But as these franchises became juggernauts and they turned into multi-billion-dollar investments, that creative spark got buried under layers of corporate oversight. And now these companies can't take the same risks that made them successful in the first place because they aren't just playing with their own money anymore. Investors demand safe returns, and the safest return is a predictable one, rehashing what's already been done. I talked about this in my Path of Exile 2 review, but the game actually felt like a true, genuine evolution of the ARPG genre. The slower, more methodical combat, the intricate boss mechanics, the build crafting, the power scaling, slowly reaching that PoE 1 like map clearing, it all felt like a natural step forward. It wasn't afraid to be complex, to challenge the player, to demand more from them. Heck, instead of dumbing down any of the systems in their game, they just provided clearer instructions, more explanations. They even put in videos on how the game works inside the game. Grinding Gear Games took risks and it paid off because they still have the freedom to experiment. They gave themselves that freedom. Then you go and look at Diablo 4, a franchise as old as Diablo, made by a company as massive as Blizzard. They should have been able to do the same thing.
True.
It should have been even more than that, and yet
Yep.
they didn't. They played it safe. They streamlined mechanics, flattened the skill ceiling, and
Yep.
prioritized accessibility over depth. Not because the developers lacked talent, but because Blizzard couldn't afford to alienate a single segment of their audience. They had too much on the line. They have shareholders to appease. Now they have Microsoft to appease. They weren't just making a game, they were managing an investment. This is one of the fundamental problems with the industry today. This is one of the reasons why players are feeling like they're not getting enough out of the games that they're buying. When a game reaches a certain scale, when a company grows too big, it becomes risk-averse by nature. The same studios that built their success on innovation and creativity are now paralyzed by their own size. The bigger they get, the less freedom they have to create anything new. They have to keep their games marketable,
Yep.
predictable, and most of all, safe. And the customer is left with...
Yeah, you know, like I do have to say, right? I do have to say that like this is one of the things that I have to say about turn-based JRPGs, right? Like it's pretty much almost like the same shit over and over again, right? But I did see like what Expedition 33 trying to experiment something new, so it'd be interesting to see. And then also Final Fantasy, what was it? I think it began with Final Fantasy 15, right? Yeah. Final Fantasy 15 is where it began for the instead of having the turn-based stuff, why not have it, you know, more actiony. You can move around, you can dodge, you can block, and all this other stuff. And then they refined it a little bit more in Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth, right? Or the remake anyways. And then from then on, you know, I don't think let me see, because the same thing with Metaphor, because Metaphor also like tried something new, which is really cool personally, you know. Granted, of course, the only one criticism I had is that I wish you didn't stand still while auto attacking in the open world, which I thought it was kind of annoying personally. That's the only criticism I have about it. I know there's a few others probably, but like that was the one thing I just didn't like the most. Like it would be nice to be able to move around while attacking the enemies instead of just like standing still and attacking. It just felt wrong, you know.
A competent yet uninspired product, a game that functions and entertains some of the time, but otherwise doesn't fulfill that vision of what could have been. And the longer that these franchises go on, well, the more that hunger grows within the player base, the more that nagging feeling that we aren't getting what we deserve, that these games aren't getting what they deserve. Because we had a vision for what these games would be. We played them when we grew up, or whatever it might have been, whenever it might have been. And we had a vision for what it would look like in the future. And we thought that they would push boundaries and they would innovate and they would change things, but that just didn't happen because these games, these companies are trapped essentially by their own success. I think that's one of the reasons why we see so much unrest in today's gaming audience
Mhm.
because the players don't feel like they're getting what they deserve. Because these games are going up in price, they're being sold to us bit by bit, but we're just getting more of the same. I think that's one of the reasons why I have a lot of respect for the Zelda series or for Final Fantasy for that matter, where at least they do try to innovate. They try to do something different.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. Not the most recent one though. I didn't like the Tears of the Kingdom personally.
Final Fantasy 16, love it or hate it, is a completely different game than any other Final Fantasy game that's out there.
True.
Personally, I love it. I think the Bahamut fight is one of the most peak moments in video games ever. It's so good. It's insanely good. But that's why I have a lot of respect, and I think it's great when I see talent start to leave some of these companies, when I see the ex-Witcher 3 director want to move on because he wants to do something new, he wants to innovate, he wants to create.
I think it's pretty
In
cool.
a lot of cases, with the situation a lot of these companies are in right now, maybe it's that these legacy IPs just don't have anywhere else to go. You have to recognize when they actually get to their peak, maybe we don't need another Witcher. Sometimes you have to have the insight to be able to realize something like that. You have to move on and go do something new, and I think that's exactly what he's doing. But investor interests, legacy IP, lack of creative freedom, these aren't the only things that he's leaving that company for. No. There's something else. There's a bigger issue that's out there in the industry, one that I think has caused a lot of games to fail, and I think it's going to cause a lot more games to fail. And the Witcher 3 director didn't leave just for creative reasons. He left to get away from the people. Conrad didn't just leave CD Projekt Red to make Blood of the Dawnwalker. He left because the company was too big to work with and the people were too much to deal with.
Damn. I mean, that's very interesting to kind of hear that, to be honest. So the people that he had to deal with was more annoying to deal with. So he wants to start over again to have a smaller team and a more refined team. That sounds about right. Yeah. Why does it feel like it has to do with like the weird stuff that's been happening with CD Projekt Red and the whole weird DEI shit that's been happening with CD Projekt Red?
In the interview, Conrad continues with, "We have a studio where we work with the people and among them, not like at a bigger studio where it's harder. I felt that a smaller team is capable of doing more because the communication is inside the team and it's easier to speak about the vision. It's easier to feel the creative fire and to do something special."
That's very true. That's actually very, very, very true. He is not wrong with that at all, to be honest.
Now, that's how he framed it in the PC Gamer interview. However, I feel like that's a bit of a revision because I remember
is true.
this isn't the first time that we heard about Conrad leaving CD Projekt Red. Because he didn't leave because of creative freedom or team size. He left because of bullying allegations. See, because...
Oh, okay. I did not know about this, actually. Oh, damn. CD Projekt Red, a toxic environment to work at? Question mark.
Because back in 2021, there was a report that an internal investigation had cleared him of any wrongdoing. He was accused of bullying other employees, and yet he still ended up resigning, saying that he felt immense sadness over the situation and how it unfolded and the stress and anxiety that he may have caused his coworkers.
That's interesting. But remember that video that we saw about the whole DEI stuff in the company itself? Remember that video that we saw? I feel like this is the same thing that's happening with CD Projekt Red in the inside, you know? Oh, that's crazy to hear.
And I think that's the real story here. Not just why he left, but why so many industry veterans are leaving some of these massive studios. It's a complete cultural shift on how games are made. Game development has always been messy. It's been full of friction. Great ideas do not come from agreeing with one another. They come from arguing, debating, pushing back. But over the last decade, the industry has become terrified of conflict. Toxic positivity, fear of confrontation, and the death of accountability. Timothy Kane, one of the original minds behind Fallout, has seen this firsthand. He talked about it in a YouTube video last year, describing how the very foundation of how developers work together has completely changed. He told a story about this time where he was working at Carbine Studios, where he had tried to implement something as simple as whiteboard listing the top 10 most urgent tasks. Back in the Fallout days, this worked perfectly. People would check the board, see what needed to be done, and get to work. Fast forward 10 years, and the same system is completely unacceptable. Developers told him that if their names appeared on that board, they would quit on the spot. Even if their names weren't included, they still refused because...
What? Who are these people? Man, what a bunch of fucking vaginas. Holy shit, man. You can't be serious about me. What the? Oh my god, dude. Man, if you're really gonna cry about your name being on a whiteboard so that you have to work on this, why even bother working at a game studio at this point? What's the point? You just wasted like your money for the education and you decide to do something like this. Man, that's crazy to me. Okay, I'm so flabbergasted.
People would figure out who was responsible. Think about how insane that is. The idea that public accountability was so offensive.
Don't tell me what to do.
Leave the company and have their work attached to their name. This is the industry that Conrad left, an industry where calling out a problem is treated as a problem itself. Kane also talked about...
See, chat, now you guys understand why I want to own my own game studio in the future and work with people, you know, because we can make good video games. All right, we can with our own hands, with the passion that we have, you know, as a smaller team dev, you know. But like, man, dude, just hearing this about the video game industry is just so bad, you know. It's just completely so bad in general.
Arguing in game development, the kind of back and forth, high energy debates that shape great games. He and another creative would scream at each other over design choices, jumping up to scribble things on whiteboards, pacing back and forth, fighting over the best solutions, not because they were angry, but because they cared, because they wanted to challenge one another. And guess what? People in the office couldn't handle it. They were told to stop. People were too uncomfortable. This is the industry now, too fragile to handle conflict, too afraid to push each other to do better. And when you strip away conflict, when you strip away accountability, what's left?
Oh, geez, really? People are scared? All I gotta say is, I don't want you on my team. That's all I gotta say. I don't want you on my team. No. Can't have this shit.
Safe, predictable, uninspired games. There's a reason why so many of today's biggest releases feel hollow, like they were designed by a committee rather than creatives, because they were. Ideas aren't being fought for anymore. People aren't being challenged. The people that are making games don't have to prove their ideas in an environment where others can push back and make them better. And instead, once they're exposed to oxygen, once they're exposed to the consumer, we are the ones that are pushing back on those games and those ideas, and that's why those games are failing. But I don't want to pretend like this is just a cultural thing. It's a two-headed dragon. One head is fragility, and the other is the sheer size of these companies and how difficult it is for these developers to get anything done, for decisions to be made, or to keep the creative vision alive. I think that both are true for Conrad and Rebel Wolves. It's part culture, and the other is that, well, yeah, a smaller team can get more done. And that's the thing. That's the reason why I don't see industry layoffs or developers striking out on their own as a bad thing. It's good for them. It's good for us. And it's ultimately good for some of these larger companies. The gaming industry needs to downsize. These companies are too big, too bloated, too slow to adapt. They are overmanaged and under-inspired, running on out.
Yeah, because during the whole COVID era, they just hired so many people because everyone was indoors, and they saw the numbers go up about like people staying indoors and playing video games, buying video games, you know, all of this other, they saw the money go up, you know. So then they decided to, you know, hire a ton of people and all this other shit, and well, Lord it behold, now they don't need them anymore, you know.
Dated models that worked in the past but are now crumbling under their own weight. Game developers are going to hate to hear me say this, but let's be real for a second. What does a company like Ubisoft need 20,000 employees for? What does CD Projekt Red use 1,000+ developers for? Why does EA need 5,000 employees? These companies are industrialized. They aren't making games, they're manufacturing them.
That's true.
Every role is so hyper-specialized, so compartmentalized that the creative vision gets lost in the noise. There are just too many employees. Art teams are making assets for mechanics that aren't even finished. Writers are drafting dialogue for quests that still need to get reworked. Animators are creating cutscenes for characters whose designs are still in flux. And all of this is going through layers upon layers of approval, bouncing between managers, producers, directors, executives, and shareholders, until whatever passion was there in the beginning is completely gone. This is why so many AAA games feel so empty, because they're not made, they're assembled, they are pieced together in a factory, polished just enough to be marketable, and then shoved out the door. And it's only going to get worse as these companies throw more bodies at their problems. Meanwhile, the most exciting, most creative, most successful games in the industry right now, well, they're made from smaller companies. FromSoft, less than 300 people delivering masterpieces like Elden Ring and Armored Core 6. Game Science, less than 200 people worked on Black Myth Wukong. Larian Studios, less than 500 people creating one of the greatest RPGs ever made in Baldur's Gate 3. Hello Games, less than 100 people building and maintaining an entire universe in No Man's Sky, and also still working on Light No Fire. How does that even happen? I mean, Minecraft was only created by a handful of developers and it became one of the best-selling games of all time. Terraria was made by 11 people and it sold 44 million copies. Countless indie games made by teams of under 10 people breaking through, selling millions, because they are made with passion and vision, not corporate mandates.
Yeah, that's true. They don't have like the suits at the top or so telling them what to do, what to make, and everything like that, you know. They're their own people, you know. They decide to get in a group or so. They decided to talk about what they need to do, like story writing, character creation, blah blah blah, all this other stuff, you know. Like for me, because like I wrote like stories, you know, and I want to create some of these. I want to bring these stories to real life, you know. But granted, I would have to refine them again, right? Because they were like what 10 plus years ago, so I would probably have to like refine them and everything like that. I love to make like really good, interesting stories where you love the characters, you hate the characters, you know, you all this other stuff, you know. You make you pull your little heartstrings, you know, just a tad bit, you know.
And none of this is a coincidence. Smaller teams are more agile, they're more creative, they're more in sync with one another. It's so much easier to be able to communicate.
Plus, also at the same time, you know, they have to work together. You know, they have to work together, and they know. And like the funny thing about it is like, for some apparent reason, like from the video from that old guy or so, right? He was talking about earlier in the video, that like in one of the videos that I saw a long time ago or so, that he wanted to ask this one employee for a coding or so, like how long can you like how long will it take you to do this and this and this, right? Apparently the person that was working under him would have to take 3 weeks, roughly 3 weeks, to get it done. And it was just a simple thing, like it was a pretty simple thing, and he can do it in like by lunchtime, which was the craziest thing about it. Hey, Galen.
Don't have to deal with bureaucracy, corporate oversight, or marketing-driven decision-making. They can just make games how they were meant to be made, with heart, with identity, with purpose. So when I see these massive companies laying off thousands of people, when I see these bloated studios struggling to survive, when I see experienced leadership leave, I don't see that as the industry collapsing. I see that as the industry correcting itself. These companies grew too big, too fast, too inefficient.
Yep.
They lost touch with what made them great in the first place.
Yep.
They need to downsize. They need to split apart. They need to stop pumping out soulless, committee-driven products and let developers make real games again. Because when you strip away all of the corporate nonsense, when you break down these teams into the people that actually care about making games, that's when you get something authentic. You know, when I made my video where I was talking about how they wanted to raise the price of games to $100, one of the excuses they gave was how expensive it was to make games today, and also how developer wages have increased over the years. And the funny thing is, you know, sitting back and thinking about it, the reason why they're spending so much money on these games is likely because of inefficiency.
Yeah.
In construction, I'll tell you right now, the vast majority of money that is wasted on a project of any size or any scope oftentimes is bad communication and wasted time.
That's very true. Plus also like the size of the team itself, the amount of people you have to pay and everything like that. And like compared to like in the olden days, plus like you don't need, not every single game needs to be a AAA blockbuster a 10 out of 10 game, you know. We can get a AA game or just a normal A game, you know, or a B tier game, you know, like a good example, freaking wasn't it Space Marines? You know, Space Marines is pretty damn good, but I don't think it's like a heavy 10 out of 10 AAA blockbuster cinema thing, you know. It's like, no, it's a pretty good game. Like you don't, it doesn't need to go like over beyond the budget it needs to go off of, you know.
And I guarantee that's what these companies are suffering from, because you have people that are working on the wrong thing at the wrong time or spending money on the wrong thing.
Yeah.
If you're a smaller company, that doesn't happen as much.
That's true.
And that's probably one of the
very
biggest
true.
weaknesses they have. And beyond that, you know, they want to talk about how they want to increase wages for developers, because if we raise the price, we'll be able to pay the developers more, even though obviously we know that their CEOs are taking way more than that to begin with.
He's not wrong there, to be honest. He's not wrong there.
But beyond that, the funny thing is if you have a smaller studio and you're able to stay efficient, you're able to make really good games and stay successful, well, then you're able to spend more money on your developers in the first place. You're able to pay them more money. I think Valve is a really good example of that. Obviously, they have a lot of different things that make them money, Steam, but with that said, if you think about it, when you have less employees, but you're still making really good games and you're still maintaining really good games, well, then you could pay your employees wherever the hell you want. You're not supposed to be up there. But I feel like in a lot of cases, when it comes to some of these companies, they just want to grow for the sake
random
of
kitty
growth.
cat.
There's really nothing else behind it. They just keep throwing bodies at problems and thinking they're going to be able to make games faster, make bigger games and things like that. But I don't think that's necessarily what the players want either. So there's a lot of different issues that are at play, but I really do think it comes down to just how big these companies are, and they have to downsize. They got to bring it, they got to dial it back a little bit. Otherwise, it's just going to get out of control. And I'm predicting that Blood of the Dawnwalker is going to be a hit. I'd almost guarantee it.
Oh, yeah.
You have a lot of staff that's there that are veterans of one of the greatest RPGs ever made, that have no limiting factors on how creative they can be. There, you don't have to worry about offending anybody in the office. They're all friends. Conrad said so in
That's
his
good.
interview. I just want to make a good friend.
That's really good.
With my friends is what he had said in his interview. There's no restrictions there. It's an intimate environment. They're all together. They can easily communicate with one another and actually work in the trenches. You know, I think, you know, when I look at some of these bigger studios, a lot of the leadership doesn't even really work on the things that they used to anymore. You have executives at these companies that used to be developers. Maybe they used to be an artist or a level designer, but now they're not actually doing any of that work anymore. And I think you can get so much more work done and better work done when you're right there with the employees doing the work with them. And to be honest with you, and I guarantee a lot of you guys are going to click with this, how many times has it felt so much better doing the work you're doing? How much more motivated you were when your boss came to work with you, doing the work that you do? That goes a long way. Anyway, I think this is really cool. I think this game is going to turn out really well. I really like the trailer. I love the premise of the game, and I really like his motivation behind leaving. Obviously, I'm adding some of my own reasoning to it, but I would almost guarantee that's probably going to be the case. I mean, anytime you're working in an environment where you have to be afraid of what you can and can't say to
Yeah, I feel like definitely that like indie game is like the new topic now. You know, being, you know, it's kind of funnier so that like it's kind of like almost, it's almost like comparing to the VTuber scene, right? Being in a corporation a couple years back was the thing that you were trying to achieve, but now being indie is the new hot topic. Now in the video game industry, people wanted to go into these big game studios, right, to begin with. But now it's like, no, now it's the indie is the new hot topic and all this other stuff, which is very interesting to kind of see how they kind of both mirror with each other at the same time. You know, it's very interesting. But yeah, like I said, like for me personally, like, yeah, I'm like, you don't really need that many people or so to make a video game, you know? As long as they're having a good time making video games and they're passionate about it, you know, and they want to make like an actual good, you know, good game, you know, that's yours truly here, that I would love to do that for everyone else in the future, you know. One day far off in the future, I'll be like, you know, I'll make everyone proud here in my community, you know, be like, yeah, that's my VTuber mom right there. She made a video game. She made a good video game, you know. I want to make everyone proud, you know, at least get a good first game, you know, out the window. But make it good, take our time, you know, don't rush things, you know. We just got to do what we got to do, and yeah, that's pretty much frankly about it. But yeah, overall, it's very interesting. We're gonna spread the word. Yeah, when I get that first trailer out, you know. We ever get that first trailer, but not anytime soon. Not in anytime soon, because number one, of course, number one, we got to get our VTuber model. That's the plan for this year, anyways. That's step one. But yeah, it's pretty cool. I'm hoping that the video game industry kind of goes into a different direction with all of this stuff. You know, I just wish some of these people who play these other games or so would just give the benefit of the doubt and try out some of these indie games, you know? I think some of these indie games are more enjoyable, you know? Or some of just the lesser known, like, popular ones. You know how, like, in anime, like, during the early days of anime, the big shonen, the big three, you know, just the big shonen and just the big names of anime were, like, the big popular ones. But then, like, once you start learning about the lesser known anime ones, like the non-popular ones, then it becomes like, you know, oh, this is really cool. You know, they take risks. You know, they do something different or so. You know, with their thing, not the isekai stuff. That's completely something different. But like back then or so, back then in old times when it comes to anime, yeah, like always seeing like weird things or so in anime, like weird designs or something like that. But yeah, anyways, it's just cool. It's just really cool in general. But anyways, that's the end of the video. You guys can comment, like, subscribe, do all that fancy jazzy stuff, and yeah. Like I said, what do you guys personally think? Let me know in the comment sections, and that's the end of the video. One day I'll make you guys proud. One day. But for now, we struggle in the trenches for now, trying to survive. And that's the end of the video. And peace.